happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
Kind of a slow news week.
God.
We're a little wrung out here. W-R-U-N-G.
Yeah, that's an inside joke.
All right, so starting off, and a lot of this you've heard about, but we're going to give you context and analysis.
You bet.
A district court judge made Arkansas the first state in the South to open marriage to gay couples, and they got underway the next day.
So we thought that was a big headline. Wow, Arkansas opens marriage to same-sex couples. But then this week, a federal judge in Idaho ruled that the state ban on same-sex marriage violated the U.S. Constitution.
And these are all beautiful decisions. You should read them. The Fourth Circuit in Virginia heard arguments on the same-sex marriage ban there in the Commonwealth.
And a lot of interesting angles to that. Now, all but 2 U.S. states have either marriage equality or lawsuits challenging marriage inequality.
Sam's a Ram. You may have read about that, too. The first out NFL player. Wait until you see the moment he found out, if, of course, you haven't seen it already about 10,000 times.
Yes, exactly. But
we'll show it to you again.
And we'll talk about the people who talked about it. The Pentagon is looking at transferring Chelsea Manning to a civilian prison so she can receive hormone therapy. As Defense Secretary Hagel appeared on this week with Stephanopoulos, I think, and said that the transgender exclusion policy should be continually reviewed. The
USDA, that's the Department of Agriculture, and NCLR, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, are launching something called Rural Pride as Mississippi fights back against its anti-gay laws. People in Mississippi, good people in Mississippi.
Clay Aiken is the official Democratic nominee now for a congressional seat in North Carolina, but he is going to face a strong Republican incumbent in a heavily Republican district.
Syphilis rates in the United States have reached their highest levels since 1995, and most of the increases are among gay and bisexual men.
There are calls for the United States to pull back from the trade pact that includes the very anti-gay Brunei.
And gender effing singer Conchita Wurst of Austria won the Eurovision contest. Then this has set off shockwaves across the world.
Particularly in Russia. But we'll get to that. But first, shockwaves in Arkansas.
Circuit Court Judge Chris Piazza struck down the ban on same-sex marriage there. And in doing so, he cited the Loving decision from 1967 on interracial marriage and called the ban on gay marriage a violation of the 14th Amendment. He said, now these decisions are quite beautiful.
Yeah.
He said, it is time to let that beacon of freedom shine brighter on all our brothers and sisters. We will be the stronger for it.
It's also interesting that he's a state court judge. He's not even, this decision didn't even technically cover the whole state, just certain counties. He did cite both the Arkansas state constitution and the U.S. Constitution guarantees of equal protection and due process.
He rejected the procreation argument. He said we don't insist on opposite sex couples to procreate to merit marriage, and a marriage license is a civil document and is not, nor can it be based on any particular faith. These are very important. He's making these arguments. And then he says the amendment was driven by animus. Which, of course, the other side wouldn't say they hate us, but we just want to keep marriage a certain way. It passed with 75% of the vote in 2004, but times have changed.
I have
a lot of people down there, and a lot of pro-gay people that I know down there.
Yep. So the state has asked for a stay, but marriages began immediately because the judge ordered that marriages begin immediately. So we have a picture of the first couple married in Arkansas.
In Eureka Springs, Carroll County, right?
Yeah, Kristen Seaton and Jennifer Rambo there with their lawyer, Cheryl Maples, who also served as their witness. They slept in their car to be first in line because when they heard this decision, it came out on a Friday after the offices had closed, but there were a couple of places that were going to be open on Saturday to give licenses. Most of those offices are not open on Saturdays. So they heard about this. They saw that Eureka Springs was going to be open. They got in their car. They drove to Eureka Springs, and they slept in their car overnight.
And a good thing, too, because they stopped them in Eureka Springs after a local attorney filed suit against it. Marriages got underway in Little Rock on Monday. One total protester showed up. That's the other thing we're seeing. The other side kind of given up on this. Most counties did not issue licenses. Washington County did. Saline County did. I hope I'm saying that right. And some people were denied in one county. They went to the next county.
Well, this is because this is not an overall state decision. So there's some debate,
right.
and the state has asked for a stay. But as we are taping, there has been no stay issued yet. There is one person objecting to this, the former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, who is just rabid on the subject.
Running for president, I think, again.
You know, he portrays himself as this very, actually, moderate, nice guy.
Yeah.
He's always a nice guy. If you look at his TV show on Fox on Saturday nights, he's a nice guy. Yeah. But then he says, oh, this judge should be impeached for overturning the will of the people. And I always think when people talk about activist judges or judges ignoring the will of the people, that the people who are charging that should be tried for treason because they are denying the entire United States
right.
constitutional system.
Separation of powers.
And a three-part government. These judges' job is to interpret the Constitution.
Yep. Now, there were 46 plaintiffs in this case. The Attorney General is appealing and asking for a stay. They haven't gotten it yet as of this report. Jack Wagoner, one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs, said he was honored to do his father proud because his father opened the first interracial medical practice in Arkansas in 1969. That's how late it was. Judge Wendell Griffin performed some of the ceremonies. He's also a Baptist preacher. He said one of the couples has been together longer than he and his wife of 43 years. Yeah.
Now, this is the first in the South to take this on, but it's also important to note that even though 3/4 of the state voted for this ban on same-sex marriage 10 years ago, Arkansas is an interesting place, and Eureka Springs
The Clintons are from there, I think.
So I've
The guy who
heard.
signed the Defense of Marriage Act.
Yes, that too. But Eureka Springs is a hotbed of gaydom, and there are a lot of very gay places in Arkansas.
And
so
all over. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we are in Idaho, where this week a federal judge ordered marriage. This is now the 11th state to have its judges declare same-sex marriage legal in the last year since DOMA was overturned.
Of course, being in the Ninth Circuit, they're bound by all kinds of precedents around not just marriage cases, but around the Smith-Kline decision, which gave heightened scrutiny. Yes, that's all in here. And again,
But the judge said these laws do not withstand any applicable level of constitutional scrutiny, and that's the thing. There are lots of arguments about we have to go into court, we have to get heightened scrutiny, so they'll look at these laws with more of a jaundiced eye. But the fact is, what all these decisions say across the board is this exclusion of same-sex couples from marriage does not make sense, and you cannot justify it.
Said it was every individual enjoys a constitutional right to marry, which is what came up in the Loving case about interracial marriage. It is a fundamental right. Prisoners can get married to people on the outside, for God's sakes. They didn't mention that.
deadbeat dads
Court-
can get married.
Court said that we don't need to resolve the sociological debate about who makes good parents. We don't have a parent test for getting married, whether you're going to be a good parent or not. I mean, so it's just like irrelevant.
Well, the other thing is that, as all these judges have pointed out, when these right-wingers go into court and try to argue that they're arguing for the sake of the kids and their need for a parent, is the judges look at them and say, excuse me, but all these same-sex couples have kids. What are you doing to those kids? You know, don't they have a right to benefits and legal status and two legal parents?
I think that influenced Justice Kennedy quite a bit in the Windsor decision. And in this Idaho case, the judge also said that the government's argument concerning religious liberty is myopic. Really tore it apart.
Yeah.
And that's all going to be very important going forward. So quite wonderful.
And we're looking at the same thing happening in Virginia at the Fourth Circuit. Now, all these cases that are happening in the last year are at the sort of level of original jurisdiction, mostly federal district court, sometimes a state court like in Arkansas, but they're all original jurisdiction, bottom level federal courts. And next it has to go up to the appeals court, the courts of appeals in the various districts.
When's that going to happen?
And there are about a dozen districts. Well, that's what we're in the middle of now, moving up to that. And then from there, it will go to the Supreme Court. So the 10th Circuit was the first to hear appeals in the marriage cases, and that was Oklahoma and Utah. Now we have the Fourth Circuit, which is the second federal Court of Appeals circuit to hear an appeal from a marriage case.
I read where it's considered the most conservative. You think that might be more in Texas?
It's not going to be more conservative than Texas and Louisiana and that circuit, where there are cases too, because a Texas judge has declared their law illegal. But in the Fourth Circuit, it's Virginia. And there are a couple of cases that have been brought together, and the Olson Boyce team has been forced to take in the ACLU team and the Lambda Legal team to all argue together at the appeals level in the Fourth Circuit against not the state, because the state, now having a Democratic Attorney General, has switched and is in it with Olson Boyce and the ACLU and Lambda. So an Alliance Defending Freedom lawyer, the right-wing lawyers, argued against us, and they had these arguments this week at the appeals level because the original jurisdiction judges declared the laws against same-sex marriage unconstitutional.
Well, speaking of which, in the Oregon marriage case, the National Organization for Marriage was told that they couldn't intervene in that case, and we have more news from Oregon coming up here.
Right, but in the Virginia arguments, so each side had half an hour. Ted Olson, James Essex of the ACLU, who watches this show now because he's here frequently, and the state attorney general's office shared that half hour of arguments.
I would have paid to see that.
That was a little close.
You can listen to it. You can listen to it online.
Yes, you can. But again, well, it's a three-judge panel. What appeared to happen, as in the 10th Circuit arguments, 2 for us, 1 against. And the 1 against was making inane, idiotic arguments.
Because that's all that's left.
Exactly. And the right wing's arguing the kids thing again. And so one of the judges said to Judge Gregory, told the Alliance Defending Freedom, it's really disingenuous, your interest in children. Love that.
And yet, are you done with Virginia?
Yes.
Back to the 9th Circuit out west there, they still haven't scheduled arguments in the Nevada marriage case.
Yep.
It's a little unclear why that's happening.
The 10th and the 4th have leapfrogged the 9th.
Yes.
So we'll see when the 9th gets around to that.
Well, somebody said it's because they haven't announced whether they're going to rehear the SmithKline decision about scrutiny and everything.
They're polling the judges
Well,
on that.
they said it sounds like they're not going to rehear it, but there are people writing dissents, and they want to wait till that's all done.
Yep.
So the wheels of justice turn slowly, folks. We're sorry if you're waiting. But you can always go to a state that allows it, by the way, if you're hanging in there,
well,
and get most of your federal rights.
Absolutely.
Even if you live in a state that doesn't have it.
And these cases, as they work up through whatever circuit, are headed for the Supreme Court, and that's why these lawyers are all eager to be in all these cases.
They want to be the one to argue it.
at the Supreme Court.
Alaska, finally, 5 same-sex couples filed in federal court for the right to marry. So the only states without marriage lawsuits now, or laws protecting same-sex marriage, are Montana and North Dakota.
When they thaw out.
They're too busy drilling for oil there in North Dakota,
Yes,
making money.
They are. But they'll get around to it. And congratulations to the Alaska couples for filing their lawsuit.
And to the Naval Academy, which hosted its first same-sex wedding.
And to the court in Indiana, which continued its order that the state recognize the Massachusetts marriage of a lesbian couple who, live in Indiana, got married in Massachusetts, came back to Indiana. One is dying of ovarian cancer.
I have a picture of them.
And
this is Amy Sandler and Nikki Kwasny. Nikki is on the left there, I believe.
And is dying of ovarian cancer. And
this was a picture from 2011, so they're looking better.
Yeah, and so the court had ordered that they, as one individual couple, have their marriage recognized so that their kids could get benefits, and the surviving wife could be put on the death certificate and all of that.
So the state is still fighting for a stay, and Lambda Legal, which is arguing the case, called that intervention shameful cruelty. Yeah. Especially given what these women are going through.
Exactly. All right, you did Oregon. In Kentucky...
Well, let's stay on Oregon for a second, because, the ballot initiative there about religious freedom and affect same-sex marriage, making religious belief exceptions to anti-discrimination law for refusing services same-sex ceremonies and arrangements. These are all some of the words that were put into the ballot title. And when those words were put in there, the right wing said, "Oh, we're never going to win this. We give up." So they've given up on this.
Well, they've given up on it as a ballot referendum, but they're now going to file lawsuits asserting that their religious rights to discriminate are being violated, and that they have the right to do that. So they're going to go to those activist judges and look for
as the
support.
Judge in the Fourth Circuit would say, I think a lot of their arguments are disingenuous.
Exactly. Well, speaking of disingenuous arguments, let's go to Kentucky, where on behalf of the governor, the Attorney General has argued...
This is the governor, Steve Beshear, who was held up as the Republican who's so good on Obamacare.
Yeah. Well, he sent his Attorney General into court on their battle over marriage to argue that to legalize same-sex marriage would lower the birth rates in Kentucky and have a significant economic impact negatively on the state.
This is perhaps the reason that the Attorney General, Jack Conway, wouldn't defend the ban. And they're getting more and more desperate. A governor, by the way, hired an outside law firm to come up with that idiotic argument.
I said Attorney General, I misspoke.
Yeah,
You're right.
And it sounds like they've had too many mint juleps at the Derby.
There are one of the continuing issues, and I find this a little discouraging, is the speed with which the federal government is putting into effect the Supreme Court decision almost a year ago, ordering the federal government to recognize same-sex marriages legally performed for federal benefits. And some things have gone into effect and some haven't. And one problem is with Social Security benefits, retirement benefits, survivor benefits, because the way the Social Security laws are written, your status, your eligibility is decided by your state of residence rather than the state of celebration of your marriage.
Well, so Democrats Patty Murray of Washington and Mark Udall of Colorado, senators in the U.S. Senate, have introduced a bill to ensure all lawfully married same-sex couples will receive Social Security spousal benefits of all kinds.
There are a couple of other versions of this bill pending, introduced by other people. There's also the question of veterans benefits some of those are beginning to kick in, others are not.
And whether domestic partners are eligible for spousal benefits based on their ability to inherit from their partners without a will under state law.
There is also an assertion that Obama can do some of this administratively.
Well, then do it.
Exactly.
Barack.
The Social Security benefits, for instance. There's a big question about why this stuff is not proceeding faster, and I think we ought to be holding his feet to the fire.
Yes, we should.
That.
What has he got to do? Congress doesn't let him do anything.
That's true. He could be doing this stuff in his spare time.
All right.
Well, the Housing and Urban Development Department is doing focus groups on anti-LGBT bias in rentals and sales of homes, and trying to get a basis of data on what's happening. So you can look for that if you think you've been discriminated against in housing.
Right. Should we talk about, are you done on marriage?
Yeah.
Should we talk about football or should we take a pass? Ha 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 ha.
Okay, we can go to football.
Well, so the biggest story, oh my God, in the country, I open up the daily, no, I don't even open up the Daily News. Michael Sam kissing his partner is on the front page. I turn over to the back. The same picture is in the back page, even bigger, the Daily News of
You're
New York.
12 hours behind. I heard it when it happened simultaneously. It was all over TV
of course,
and radio.
I watched it, of course. We watched it. I'm just saying it is being played that way as this enormous story.
Everywhere.
We're talking about Michael Sam, who was at the University of Missouri.
Yes.
He is now the first out gay in the NFL. Although he have to go to he's been drafted.
Yeah, he still has to make the team.
He has to make the team.
But here are a couple of things. He's drafted number 249 out of 256 people drafted. Now,
7th round.
Yeah, right at the very end. Now, some people thought he wasn't going to be drafted at all, and
because of his size not being big enough.
Well, that was the excuse. But that still would have made him eligible to be picked up as a free agent hired by any team. And in some ways, the whole draft is sort of a slave auction kind of thing. Maybe a little strong. But it's teams buying the right to have exclusive rights to sign a player.
I mean,
free agent, you can sign with anyone.
Kurt Brock freed the slaves. Kurt Flood?
Yes.
Kurt Flood freed the slaves. Baseball years ago, free
yes.
agency and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. So, but football is still working a little differently.
Well, of course, a lot of us have been fighting their tax exemption, but now the right wing is fighting their tax exemption because they got a gay.
So there's some question about whether his being picked so late is because of his sort of mixed record in the testing at the combine. First test, he didn't do so well. He did better the second time. As someone said to me, not everybody tests well, which I thought was cute. But, he could have been drafted earlier and higher by a team, and there is a little confusion there about whether...
Let's just see how he does. He's already got a contract with Visa, and he's already done an ad on television.
Yes. Before the draft. But what I like was his reaction where he said, as every one of those teams passed me by, I'm thinking, okay, I'm sacking their quarterback. And if we played the Vikings today, I'd be sacking their quarterback 3 times by now.
I mean, I think just for the sake of history, we should show the videotape once again of how he got the news.
Well, this is the coach of the Rams calling him before the pick was announced to tell him he was going to be picked and his reaction to that.
Okay. If we have that tape of
Yes, from
Michael
ESPN,
Sam.
which ESPN ran right after his name was announced.
Okay, as we told you, this is the moment where Michael Sam got the news that he is going to be a member of the St. Louis Rams. There you see him on the phone, and there you see the raw emotion. We've seen this so many times, over and over again for so many players.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
He actually kissed him 3 times. We ducked out of that a little early.
Yes, it was sweet.
It was very sweet.
I mean, and you know, live in some cases, right? Originally, or no?
No, that was
a tape. Yes.
it was a tape, but even better, they ran it as a tape. They could have not run that, but they ran it.
I remember when any kind of a kiss in a movie, in a television show, they either wouldn't show it or they'd cut. Even in Harvey Firestein's Torch Song trilogy, kiss. Cut to the next, scene.
Yes.
They just wouldn't linger over a kiss. So this was probably the longest kiss people have ever seen in television history.
Well, it wasn't such a long kiss, but it was repeated. I mean, he kissed him several times, and the hug was certainly long.
That's Vito. That's Vito, his boyfriend.
Vito Camisano, who is a member of the University of Missouri swim team. They've been together for a while, and. And then, as if that wasn't enough, there was a follow-up moment of celebration where they were sharing cupcakes in celebration of this. And that this all gets a little over the top, but let's take a look, if we can, at the cupcake part of this celebration.
Are working with the ESPYs and the Arthur Ashe Courage Award that he's receiving at the ESPYs. Little smashing of the cake in the face, and it's a good time all the way around. And for Michael Sam there, you get the opportunity to go live on a lifelong dream. And
now they look like they're having fun.
Yeah.
And I know this is a big tradition at weddings.
Yes.
And I think it's horrible. Why do people? Where does it come from? I mean, there's always some root of some of these things. Feeding the bride and feeding the groom and this kind of stuff, but everybody gets into this smash up.
Well,
it's kind of kinky.
Yeah. But again, all over TV, all over the news, every talk show discussing it, on and on and on.
And Michael Sam's jersey for the Rams now is outselling the NFL's #1 draft pick.
It's the second best-selling jersey after
in football.
Johnny Manziel from Texas A&M, who was humiliated by being picked 22nd and having to go to the Cleveland Browns. Michael Sam will have a lot more fun at the St. Louis Rams.
Anyway, this is an historic week. The term pro-gay has taken on a whole new meaning because this is,
A couple of footnotes on this. The Miami Dolphins, there were some negative comments online, tweets and stuff, and the Miami Dolphins' Don Jones was fined and sent to sensitivity training for tweeting OMG horrible.
OMG, that means oh my God.
Now, I'm not a big fan of big punishments.
Maybe he thought it was horrible that he was picked 249th instead of earlier. Anyway, no. But wait a minute, the Dolphins reacted swiftly. In the wake of don't forget the bullying scandal. Yeah. And Jones apologized.
Miami,
and now he wishes Michael Sam all the best.
Somehow I think he didn't write that statement.
But he did it.
Well, someone published it on his behalf. But here's what I want to point out. There's a lot of pushback on this, and a lot of people saying, well, what about his free speech rights, and how dare you punish him? And
well, because it's bigotry, that's why.
But
why do you think Donald Sterling is losing his team?
But that's the thing. People are all ready to jump on board with the Donald Sterling.
Don't put it out in a tweet. And Donald Sterling.
I just want to point out that there is some hypocrisy here and some double standard.
Yes.
You're all enthusiastic about punishing Donald Sterling by forcing him to sell his team.
Yes.
But then when this guy makes some homophobic tweets and gets punished for that, then you say, "Oh, why are you punishing him? Where are his free speech rights?"
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I got you now. You're saying that we are not held as in high esteem by the society.
I am, yes, that is exactly
Yes.
what I am saying.
And you're right.
And I, frankly, do not know.
Just ask Barack Obama why he still consorts with the Sultan of Brunei, his
Exactly.
good friend.
And I am of mixed opinion about these punishments for speech. I think there should be some consequences of social disapproval, but I'm not sure how I feel.
I mean,
about
Bill Maher was certainly on the Donald Sterling thing, saying this was meant to be a private statement. Somebody taped it illegally and leaked it, and we can't get into punishing people for these kinds of things. And we've all said things in our lives behind the closed doors that could be easily misinterpreted.
Well, thus my point. Thus my point.
Could be wrong.
I'm not sure I
But
care
with
whether Donald Sterling's comments were public or private. Clearly, he's a nasty, nasty guy in a lot of ways.
As he proved this week.
Yeah. He's still making nasty statements.
I mean, he's of course, his wife says she thinks he's demented. Well, in which case, we could forgive him, right? And give him his team back, right?
Or just put tape over his mouth.
If he's suffering from a mental disability, I'm being serious.
Well, and let me throw into this the editor of the Newton Daily News in Iowa, who was fired for writing a column saying that he hates the LGBTQXYZ Gestapo.
Well, he hates us for trying to rewrite the Bible to make our sinful nature right with God, because that ain't going to happen, folks. Anyway, the owner fired him, said he has a right to voice his opinion, and we have a right to select an editor who we believe best represents our values and serves the best interests of our readers.
So it all gets very complex.
Well, it's a private enterprise.
Yes.
Listen, a lot of places are not going to hire you or me because of some of the things we say on this show.
Well, and I came very close to losing a job, as you well know, for an action outside the
yes, indeed.
job.
I remember. We were together then.
Yes.
Okay, a little bit more on football, an update on Chris Kluwe, the outspoken pro-gay kicker who was accessed by the Minnesota Vikings, who may sue them if their probe doesn't lead to an apology to him and training for the staff there, because anyway, he has tried out for the Buffalo Bills, Chicago Bears, Oakland Raiders, and Cincinnati Bengals, but said they want someone who won't talk. He has a new career as an author and speaker on human rights, and he's also an outspoken atheist.
There you go. Also, the University of Notre Dame, which used to fight vociferously against having any gay student organization, as I remember, has now put out one of these "If you can play, you can play" videos, explicitly talking about out gay athletes at the school and celebrating them.
Well, the Fighting Irish will be disinvited to the St. Patrick's Day parade, I guess.
And because of all this controversy over the Michael Sam, Vito Camisano kiss, Mike Signorelli came up with a scheme this week to do a Facebook campaign called #KissIn, where people should post pictures of same-sex kisses. When we were working at Hedrick Martin 25 years ago, we talked a lot about the need to destigmatize, desensitize people to these kinds of images. Evidently, it's still necessary, although Michael Sam was certainly more celebrated than some have been. So this is an effort to put these images out there on Facebook and elsewhere to desensitize people.
Ann has heard this story, so I'll just tell it to you. I did this on the show in the mid-'80s for about 5 minutes, kissed my boyfriend on the show in an effort to desensitize the audience towards it. It was fun. He was
but probably boring to the audience after about the first 5 seconds.
Oh, we kept talking during it and saying what it was about. I told the story. No, I would take a little break. You have to breathe a little bit, right?
Okay.
We'll run it someday when we're really bored.
All right. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association wants to say that you can play a sport only in the gender written on your birth certificate. which is going to hurt
Terrible.
people who
Terrible.
haven't had their birth certificate marker changed.
In Chester, Pennsylvania, I want to report on the hookup homicide of Dino Dizdarovich, who met a man on Grindr on April 30th. He was strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to his face. There have been no arrests. It's the 5th such homicide nationally this year. So we're asking you folks, please protect yourself before hooking up with a stranger. Meet at a neutral location. Make sure he or she is introduced to another person, even the bartender if you're in a bar, and go to AVP, I didn't put this up there, but avp.org.
Anti-Violence Project.
.org for their safety tips on protecting yourself. I mean, just very simple things, but you have to do them when you're going home with a stranger or you're taking a big risk.
Right. In Defense Department news this week, the Defense Department announced that they are considering transferring Chelsea Manning, currently in Fort Leavenworth, to a civilian prison so she can get hormone therapy.
Well, the Department of Defense doesn't give such treatment because they expel transitioning soldiers.
Right.
But Manning cannot be discharged from the military until she serves the 35 years in prison.
Wow.
That's the deal.
But they're not talking about putting her in a women's prison. They're talking about putting her in a men's prison and giving her female hormones. That's going to work out really well.
But Secretary Hagel of the Defense Department said that last week that transgender exclusion should be reviewed. Well, that's almost in the way of saying everything should be reviewed.
Continually should be reviewed.
Well, every qualified American who wants to serve our country should have an opportunity if they fit the qualifications and can do it.
Well, there's someone making a film about this exact issue and interviewed a guy, a trans man who was on the front cover of the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago with his story. So this film, Trans-Military, is being made, and they contrast the experience in the U.S. military versus, say, the United Kingdom, where openly trans service is legal and appreciated. So we thought we'd show you a little of that documentary to show you Lanford, if I got his name right,
Despite the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the United States still discriminates against transgender people, forcing them to serve in fear and silence. Yet 13 other countries, including the United Kingdom, allow for their open service. So why not America? Today is Landon's last day of leave before his deployment. Landon's been serving in the Navy for 2 years, and he's already received commendations from his superiors and respect from his peers. He was assigned female at birth. He is constantly under the threat of discharge if anyone discovers that he is transgender.
I'm a man of my own accord. Who I am isn't the military's responsibility. Whereas the military, to uphold it, to carry on with it, is mine. They boast equality and equal opportunity and all these things, but we have yet to see a full spectrum of equal rights and the ability to do what they say we need to do.
One of America's closest allies, the United Kingdom, has allowed transgender people to serve since 1999. On a trip to England, I met with Royal Air Force helicopter pilot Isla Holden. She shared with me her personal experience of being openly transgender whilst continuing to serve in the UK's armed forces.
Were you still doing the job during that year?
I was, and that was the key thing for me, was to keep doing my job. I didn't
you were
want.
flying?
Yeah, I was flying in search and rescue for the whole period. The big thing, I didn't want my being transgender to impact that. If you have a diverse group, where diversity is not just tolerated, but it's included and encouraged, that group, that organisation is more productive, it's it's just a nicer place to work. It works better, significantly better.
I still talk to all my instructors now, and they have nothing but good to say about me, and it kills me because they're like, you're going to do great things for the Navy. You're going to be successful. You're going to have a successful 20-year career. But at the end of the day, if somebody ever says I'm a transgender service member, it's still not enough.
And you'd be discharged.
Without question.
When they filmed this, they originally had Landon's face covered because he couldn't be shown, but now he's out of the military because he's been discharged, so the film will show him full face. The Maryland governor, as we speak and are taping, is about to sign the gender identity and expression non-discrimination bill for the state of Maryland. And a committee of the New York State Assembly has once again passed the gender non-discrimination bill in New York, but
Governor Cuomo has to get behind that and make an issue of it and get it done.
get the New York State Senate to pass it.
But of course, it's all on us here in New York to make it happen.
Yes.
With our ridiculous state Senate, which is one of those where Democrats have caucused with Republicans to keep the Republicans in power. It's an outrage. Yeah. Anyway, that's why things don't get done in New York. Well, the question is whether things are going to get done in North Carolina, where Clay Aiken is the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 2nd District. He had a 369 primary vote lead, and then his primary opponent, Keith Crisco, fell and died. It is a heavily Republican district, and the incumbent is Renee Elmers.
But because of Clay's celebrity status, there's some thought that he might make some headway on that, but it's a long shot. In Houston, their vote on a non-discrimination ordinance has been postponed because the right wing wants more time to drum up opposition to it. Out
lesbian Mayor Anise Parker said, "Hey folks, this is personal for me," and was quite eloquent.
Yeah, very eloquent.
In Mississippi, there are protests that are going to happen against this anti-gay, quote-unquote, religious freedom law. They're going to protest the governor at the Ole Miss graduation ceremony, and then and they're going to wear hundreds of rainbow stickers in the shape of the state of Mississippi. On June 13th in New York City, chefs are coming up from Mississippi as part of an event at a place called City Grit, and they are going to have a table called the Big Gay Mississippi Welcome Table.
But in Salt Lake City, the Mormon Days of 47 parade has rejected a Mormon LGBT contingent.
This sort of celebrates the Mormon founding of Salt Lake City.
They say it might provoke controversy. Yeah. That they reject political agenda groups.
Sounds like the St. Patrick's Day Parade Committee.
Exactly.
In Milwaukee, a group of police officers were found to have been illegally anally probing people before people that they had detained without cause on the pretext of searching for drugs. Now, police are forbidden from doing this at all and under any circumstances.
I thought that was a common practice.
Well, that has to be done under a certain circumstance with certain other things. The cop can't just go up to you, say, spread him, and stick his finger in you. I mean, that's just not allowed. Anyway, the ringleader of this, a police officer named Michael Vagnini, pled down and is only going to get 2 years. He's avoiding having to register as a sex offender. It's not a gay story, obviously, but it's one about abuse and humiliation.
Yes.
And the higher-ups knew about it for years and did nothing.
In Cincinnati, liberal activists, LGBT activists, are putting up billboards around the city saying, would Pope Francis sign the new Catholic teacher contract?
The answer is yes.
Yes, is the answer, exactly.
Francis has not spoken out specifically on any of these anti-gay things that are happening in his church all the time.
And in Florida, in Key West, a judge there, David Auden, has resigned He's openly gay, has been for years, but he had a profile up on Manhunt, one of these dating sites.
Yeah, well, you know, hookup sites. Sure.
Exactly. It's not illegal.
No.
There were no complaints about it, but it got published. And he started railing about this as an invasion of privacy. How, when you put your profile up on a public dating site, is it an invasion of privacy for someone to notice it and publish it?
That's how we've knocked out a couple of Congress members.
Well, this is a guy who's openly gay, had done at least one good decision on gay adoption, but he's resigned because he's just, so upset that someone is...
Sex. We still haven't heard whether Dustin Lance Black is, speaking of all that, is going to accept the invitation there. Yeah. Oh, I did get a message from a viewer who said we got a very strong gay group here in Pasadena at the City College, and
the city has a lot of
We're
gay
working
people. Well, at the University of North Carolina, they're giving an honorary degree to Armistead Maupin, the Tales of the City author, and to the out lesbian president of Amherst College, Biddy Martin. So 2 of their 5 honorary degrees to us.
In Boulder, Colorado, the LGBT group Out Boulder wants the 10K race there, which is called Boulder Boulder, get it, to drop the slogan, "Sea level is for sissies." The race officials say they intend no malice, but they also don't plan to change that, and they run on Memorial Day.
I think sissy is a homophobic term.
I do.
Yeah. And Nintendo's being a little homophobic. They put out a new video game that originally where you assume a character.
Yep.
And
It's supposed to be about real life.
Yeah.
Very popular in Japan.
Yes, and now in the U.S., originally you could be any character, and you could have a same-sex couple, and then someone noticed that and they fixed it by changing it. And so now gay activists who are gamers in the United States are objecting to this. And
Nintendo has made some statements, I think, within the last 24 hours.
We'll
saying
do better in the future.
They're listening.
Yeah.
Well, in Sacramento, one of the Republican candidates for district attorney is Anne Marie Schubert, a conservative, law and order lesbian. She's the sister of Frank Schubert, who made millions running the campaigns to preserve Prop 8 in 2008, a campaign during which Anne Marie stayed silent despite having a partner and 2 kids. She's now single, but dating, and a right-winger.
The United States Department of Agriculture and the National Center for Lesbian Rights and local organizations are putting together a program of forums in rural areas, outreach to LGBT people in those rural areas to inform them about federal programs that are available to them, housing loans, food assistance, youth programs, community partnerships. And there is a proposed rule at the USDA that would add gender identity and expression to their sexual orientation non-discrimination
Speaking
rules.
of gender identity and expression, Leah Delaria won't perform at the Michigan Women's Festival, Mishfest, because it refuses entry to transgender women, insisting on women-born women.
It's been a fight for many years.
The Williams Institute has a new study saying 86% of federal contractors already ban discrimination based on sexual orientation, 61% based on gender identity overall. 98% of the country's big companies forbid sexual orientation discrimination, and 85% gender identity discrimination, which is a good argument for Obama doing an executive order. But still, as reported, you reported last week, 53% are not out on their jobs.
People are still scared. Please come out.
Yes.
Although, yes, you should be careful to protect your
And we got a big
status.
boost in the campaign to make the Employment Non-Discrimination Act a broader civil rights act that embraces all categories. Former National Gay and Lesbian Task Force Director Matt Foreman came out strongly against the bill in its present form, calling it a lifeless corpse and that we should demand full equality.
Well, it's interesting because I think there was an argument years ago that you might have to proceed incrementally. But clearly, with all this news that we're seeing more and more every day, the thinking is that the country is ready for a comprehensive civil rights bill for LGBT people. And why not? And so if ENDA's not going to pass, fine. Throw it in the dustbin of history. Write a better bill that's comprehensive. Forget all these broad religious exemptions.
I support all that. The argument,
Good.
the pushback you get from these groups like HRC and others is
Mostly HRC.
it means that it would have to go through 10 congressional committees instead of one or something like that.
Okay.
But fine, let's have the
start
fight.
it.
Let's have the
start it.
dialogue.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. International news.
Well, on the Brunei issue, despite the imposition of Sharia law on gays, women, and infidels, Obama is pushing the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership with Brunei and other nations. It would give Brunei and other nations special economic privilege. It also harms American workers, exempts foreign companies from environmental standards, and allows them to bypass American courts.
And protects U.S. pharmaceutical companies from generic manufacturers around the world. That's a big one.
Now,
but I finally read what's behind all this, these trade pacts. They're trying to stop China from becoming the big world economic power. This is the U.S. trying to... who?
China.
This is the U.S. going into business with a lot of other countries.
Well, there got to be some standards. Now, there's still the hotels issue because the Sultan of Brunei owns the Dorchester Hotels, and of course the Beverly Hills Hotel is one of them. And the hotel's Polo Lounge, the power spot in Beverly Hills, is now a ghost town. Nobody will go there. And HRC wants to block the expansion of the hotels into New York City. We might be willing to help with that.
If it actually happens. Cuba held a supposed...
No, let me find one more thing on the Brunei thing. I finally read all the Sharia law. Man-to-man sodomy, the penalty is stoning to death or whipping with 100 strokes. But the lesbianism is $40,000, 10 years in prison, and whipping with under 40 strokes, or a combination of the two.
Oh, boy.
What a bargain.
Yeah. In Uganda, the Sexual Minorities of Uganda organization, the gay group there, says there's a big rise in attacks on LGBT people since the anti-gay Uganda law has passed.
Yes, and one of the biggest gay activists there is seeking asylum in the United States. He has a 16-year-old daughter back home and says it's too dangerous to return.
In Cuba, they held what they claimed was a big LGBT conference of people from around the world, but independent Cuban LGBT activists were not allowed to attend the conference.
Outrageous.
It's a put-up job.
We were speaking of China before. In advance of the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square, a group of gay activists has been caught up in the security sweep. Police are pressuring venues not to host their events. 9 activists were detained.
Well,
and
there was an LGBT conference scheduled in Beijing. The cops swept in, arrested 9, canceled the event. This was just a conference to talk about organizing for legal rights. But they are planning to hold a Pride March still on this weekend in observance of Idaho, the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, which is celebrated all around the world this weekend, although not so much in the United States.
Did we talk about this London protest against?
No.
Okay, so Uganda's President Museveni was at the St. James Hotel in London for a trade conference sponsored by the UK Foreign Office. They protested, Peter Tatchell and company protested so loudly outside it caused a background disruption. They used those whatever they're calling. And they called Museveni a tyrant in a corrupt regime guilty of widespread human rights violations, and also noted that HIV is going back up in Uganda.
Also in London, there was a protest against Valery Gergiev, the Russian conductor who is still supporting Putin, not only on the anti-gay law, but now on his invasion of Ukraine and Crimea and everything. But he's still performing with the London Symphony, this time at an outdoor concert in Trafalgar Square. 30 gay and Ukraine protesters disrupted the concert there.
Right.
And we mourn the death of Lex Watson, an Australian activist since 1968. He was one of the most important gay activists in Australia from New South Wales, and he was both an AIDS activist and a gay activist. In 1976, he was speaking about gay rights, and people started throwing excrement at him, and he just stood there and said, see how we're treated?
I remember when we got eggs thrown at us in Queens when we were protesting, and they hurt, by the way. They're very hard.
But the big news
But
internationally.
I think I'll take it over the crap.
The big news internationally this week was the victory of Conchita Wurst of Austria in the Eurovision
This
contest.
is the numbed singing of Tim Neuwirth. Is that the name?
Neuwirth, yes. I thought it was
Yeah.
Tom.
Tom,
but
maybe.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's remind you of Conchita's appearance. This is Conchita singing at the contest. Let's hear a little Conchita.
Yeah,
A little
sound up.
audio.
Getting nearer.
Maybe.
Who can
Shorter.
this person be? You wouldn't know me at all today. From the fading light I fly, rise like a phoenix out of the ashes, seeking rather than vengeance, retribution. You were one. Once I'm transformed, once I'm reborn.
This is what won, and of course the Russians are saying it's the end of the world, and this is
They
what
tried to keep it off Russian TV.
this is what Europe is going to happen when you align yourselves with Europe, etc.
It's also, it immediately went to #1 on the Russian iTunes channel.
It's a cultural breakthrough. This is again gender F. It's this is not sort of transgender. This is this is a
Conchita
character.
says, "I am not transgender. I am a man with a beard who performs as a drag performer in this character of Conchita." And this performance is dedicated to everyone who believes in a future of peace and freedom. You know who you are. We are unity and we are unstoppable.
It was quite a breakthrough. Very important there, that Eurovision contest.
Yes.
All right, some AIDS news?
Yes.
Syphilis levels in the United States have reached their highest level since 1995. All the increases among men and a steady rise among gay and bisexual men.
Treatable with antibiotics, but
yeah,
please
but
get tested.
The rate has doubled since 2005. Truvada will not protect you from that, but they're working on Truvada on a monthly injection.
That'd be great.
Which would be helpful. But the group Health HIV found that nearly half the healthcare providers don't know how to provide HIV clinical care. So the problem is getting people these drugs and getting doctors who know how to prescribe them.
Ignorance. It looked like a good headline that the New York Police Department was going to stop confiscating condoms from arrestees and using them as evidence of prostitution, but the fact is the new rules say, well, we can still do it when we want to, if we want to prove that someone is promoting prostitution or sex trafficking.
Well,
where you draw the line is the question.
Mayor needs to get on that, because he did say a policy that actually inhibits people from safe sex is a mistake and dangerous, so you have to follow that through on that.
The GMHC annual AIDS walk is this Sunday. Go to gmhc.org for information about that.
AIDS in Africa is predominantly among women, and a Time story said that this is perhaps because of a parasitic disease that women get, schisto, that could be fixed with an 8-cent pill, and they could save a lot of money on AIDS if they could get people this pill.
Donald Sterling saying nasty things about Magic Johnson having AIDS. This from a man who has uncountable mistresses and is a racist pig.
Right.
The Normal Heart movie version premieres on HBO next weekend, May 25th. And here's another free speech thing. The Benham brothers, who were thrown off HGTV, wanted Charlotte, North Carolina to reject all Pride Parade applications. And I think that's all the time we have, but we will see you next week.